Yeah, so as I said before, this is about Picasso, and I'm going to start sharing screen with you. Right, can you see that?
Yeah.
Yes.
And I'm really going to talk mainly about one painting of Picasso's in 1907, Les Demoiselles d'Avignon, because it was such an important one. And I read a book about it by Niles Unger, which was about, he called it Picasso and the Painting That Shocked the World. And whilst I don't necessarily agree with it, I think it's an interesting line to follow and to look at it. But before you can really do that, you've got to just be aware, I mean, the huge complexity of what Picasso did between his, you know, he died in 1973. So he was painting in the 19th century quite a bit when he was very young. I think you have to explain a bit about that. It also then leads you into looking at the various different traditions, you know, from Impressionism, Post-Impressionism and all that, which we all know about vaguely, but it's hard to know how they came to be called that. So I thought I'd put quite a lot of introduction into it anyway. So that's, this is a self-portrait of him at the age of 18, which vaguely reminds me of somebody, and I don't know who it is. It looks quite modern, doesn't it? Any idea? Like some sort of film star or something? But anyway, very often the early portraits seem to be like that. They seem to be remarkably modern. But that's his self-portrait. He did obviously he did hundreds of self-portraits eventually, but that was one of his first ones.
It's a bit Tom Courtenay-ish, actually.
Yes.
A young Tom Courtenay, yeah.
Yes, I think you're right. I think, yes, that's probably closest to it. I think you're right. Rather cool hairstyle as well.
Yeah, and sculptured in quite an expressive face. It's not how I think of Picasso. I tend to think of him, you know, when he was older.
Bald as well.
Yeah.
It's presumably is it a charcoal drawing?
Yes, it is. It's a charcoal drawing. Yeah,
it looks like it.
Yeah, but what I think is useful to see is the kind of the timeline for Picasso's, and if you can see this, which I'm just superimposing on it, this is the art period timelines, just to give it the background. So can you see that?
Yeah.
Yep. This is I'll just minimize that. So he was born in 1881 in Malaga in Spain. Didn't spend much of his life in Spain, most of it in France, in fact. But his father was an art teacher, and he was supposedly said to have, when he saw his son drawing at the age of 6 or whatever, he decided not to paint himself anymore. I think that's probably apocryphal, but he was if you like, a child prodigy, and there he is in 1889. Then in beginnings as a painter. This is the period when he did the Les Demoiselles d'Avignon, and he previously trained under his father. Nice thick coat there, presumably for a Spanish winter. And then you've got the various periods, and in fact, some of the ones I'm going to show you are in the blue period. This is a very famous one of the old guitarist.
I love that. It's beautiful.
It tended to do it in a blue atmosphere, which why it became known as the blue period. Later on, there was also the rose period, where it's, if you like, more on the red and browns sort of colors. And this is Acrobat et Jeune Harlequin. And he was very keen on harlequins. Very delicate colors, a bit less gloomy. Then the famous one, which is cubism, which of course is the Les Demoiselles and various others, and creating geometric style subjects with duller colors. He developed that really with Georges Braque at the same time. They don't particularly look like cubes, but you can see the sort of geometric styles in them as well. I don't think I'm a particularly great fan of that period, but it was obviously a very important one in moving away from realism.
I think I quite like the use of shade and, you know, the way the colours are give sort of depth to the painting. I mean, I'm not that keen myself, but it's interesting to see the way that that he's created that sort of image.
Yes, you can see the experimental aspects to it, can't you? They're trying things out, I feel, a lot in it, which is fair enough. Then there was a neoclassicism period, which I wasn't very familiar with, when he created sculpturesque women reminiscent of Grecian forms. That was quite a long one as well. Then, of course, there was surrealism with dreamlike paintings, which is also attached to lots of other different painters.
Yeah.
And then what's called a style similar to stained glass, when forms that were outlined with thick black lines. You can see the relationship there to it, and also the particular style of the way he's doing faces as well seems very typical of Picasso. Then there's a neo-expressionism. I'll come back onto expressionism. Double images. Jacqueline, yes, 1961. I quite like this one, actually. I think it's a good one. I haven't seen it before.
I hadn't mentioned that I posed for him, did I?
Even at a very young age.
But he was 80 then, wasn't he?
Yeah, it was quite late on. Yeah.
Yeah, to me, it's kind of like quite old, isn't it? Really, to be fair.
And of course, he died in Mougins in France in age 91. And
that's interesting.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, back to the self-portrait. So that's, oops. This was in his early period as well. It's Picasso and the Frugal Repast. That was when he was starting his blue period as well. But this was, he did this as a print. He taught himself how to do printmaking, and this is his second attempt at it. And those themes of blindness, poverty, etiolated bodies was kind of fairly typical of his period. I really quite like that one. It's very, very imaginative sort of. Again, it's one I've never seen of his.
It's very expressive, the faces.
Yeah. And then we came to the vast painting. Just think of the size of it. 8 foot by nearly 8 foot is the painting. Les Demoiselles d'Avignon, which helped define cubism. We'll come on to it in more detail. Meanwhile, there have been various other forms of it. For example, impressionism was developed by Claude Monet and others, and all very famous painters: Monet, Renoir, Degas, and Cézanne. And it's a really lovely one, isn't it? The Degas one of the ballerinas, which he seemed to be fairly obsessed with doing. Now, this I didn't know that Impressionism, this is Monet's Impression Sunrise, it was dismissed by critics as worse than wallpaper.
It's gorgeous.
I think it's really lovely, yes.
It's gorgeous.
Yeah.
And of course, that's where the word Impressionism came from.
That's exactly it, yeah. It was actually said in a sarcastic manner. You know, the Impressionists, people who don't actually do any drawing, they just do impressions of stuff. But it's, of course, everybody now loves Impressionism, I think. We've become much more accepting of what seemed to be like unrealistic portrayals of real scenes.
I think it's interesting that at that period, photography became much more important. So, you know, you've got you can just get your picture from a photograph rather than. So this is a kind of different way of looking at things, isn't it? Really? Yeah,
and maybe that's because, if you like, photography took over naturalism, didn't it?
Yeah,
it's very extreme. Whereas, so to make a differential, trying to do things exactly like a photograph didn't seem much point, I imagine.
I hadn't thought of it like that. That's really interesting.
And then, of course, after that, you've got the post-impressionists, who are fantastic, really, weren't they?
Oh, just
yeah,
fabulous.
I love Gauguin, I think.
Yeah. I've been reading the Mutiny on the Bounty, which is a fantastic book, if you ever come across the recent one, and of all that happened there. And of course, Tahiti, which is where, isn't that where, I haven't checked that up, but it's where he went, isn't it, and lived for quite a while.
Yes.
It's obviously an absolutely amazing place. So you've got ones like the Cézanne, and they try and distinguish the way in which they painted, and they said that his was the he kept with the fundamental idea of painting from nature, but with added rigor. And I don't know what the added rigor means, unless it's to make it slightly more realistic. But anyway, that's what the art critics said. Then, When Will You Marry Me? Nafai Fai Apiopo, Poipo, by Goga, 1890.
Well done.
Okay. And he tended to do it with a lot of light and color in it, which was, I think, very imaginative subject matter, and not all from life as well. Did I miss one there? No, Cezanne. This is Seurat, who he was more scientific, and this is actually, of course, an example of another form of art, which we're familiar, movement in art, which is the pointillists.
Yes.
I really quite like this one. It is very different, isn't it? It's very sort of, they're all very static and upright.
I really like that.
All got very good posture.
Yes, if only. Oh, says she, sitting upright. Sunday in the Park with George.
Yeah, it's a wonderful musical.
Yeah.
And the fact that in the theatre they recreated that scene.
Oh, did they?
Did they?
That would have been something. That would really have been something. Yeah.
That, absolutely.
Sunday in the Park with George. Is George there?
Yeah.
No, he's gone. This is another movement, and of course there's Van Gogh, who painted in ways that are expressing his emotional response to the things that were going on with him. But there was another movement as well, which I hadn't been familiar with, which is before, which Picasso belonged to a bit, which was led by Henri Matisse in the early days of the 20th century, called Fauvism. Fauvism means the wild beasts, the way they painted. But I think this one by Matisse is really lovely. And very, I don't know whether it's right to say ahead of its time, but it feels like it is. So
very strong color.
Yeah, I just love things with those kind of range of colors, and it does give a feeling for the warmth of a Saint-Tropez night. Oh, we should be so lucky.
I find it too red. I prefer
the more subtle ones.
The subtle and the greens and the blues and
yeah. Well, everyone to their own taste, eh?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So that's Matisse, and then I'm going through the various styles now, just to give the background to it. Cubism. It seems to have been over analyzed a bit, I think. This is called analytic cubism, which Picasso developed with Georges Braque, whose paintings at the time were very similar, using browns and neutral colors. And we're looking at things in terms of their shapes. And this was called the Reservoir, 1909. And it's hard to see where the actual reservoir is in that, other than there's a imagination. And then there's another example of his, which I think I've got more detail in the second one now. I don't know what that one was. That the same as that one? Yes, it was, the Reservoir.
Yes.
That was him at the time. And this is another one he did of somebody called Daniel Kahnweiler, who's, I think it was, bought some of his paintings in 1910, which is also Cubist. But you can see the outlines of a person within that, can't you?
It's like David said in his art thing, as soon as you find the eyes, you see the face.
Yes, you can see it, don't you, over here?
There's another face to the left.
Oh, welcome, Gordon.
Well,
there's another face over here.
Yes.
Yes, you can see a mouth there, can't you? Is that the mouth, you think?
Yes.
Looks like it.
Possibly.
Hiding behind, yeah. As I was saying, I'm not the greatest fan of Cubism itself, but it's obviously a really important movement in that it led them away from one style of painting to another, and then I think they came back from this rather extreme version of geometric shapes all over the place. So it then moved on to synthetic cubism. Good Lord, who comes up with these names?
Good marketing plan.
Where you using
it's collage.
It's also, yes, it's said that Picasso was the real inventor of collage as linked to painting. Placed it into competition. Yeah, so it's first used in fine art. L'homme au carte.
Cut and paste.
Yeah, again, not my favorite, but not, interesting colors.
Yeah.
Now it's going back to his earlier period when he was being influenced by Cézanne, and this is his two nudes, which was done in 1906, just before he did Les Demoiselles. And so by then he was working in Paris in his Montmartre studio, as everybody was, I presume. And one Picasso scholar has described the paintings of these early years as a progression from outer presence to inner shape, from color to structure, and from modified romanticism to a deeper formalism. Don't know what all that means, but sounds good.
So it does. Sounds excellent.
Let's come on to Les Demoiselles. Now, the reason I put this one up is to show when you're looking at reproductions online, you get very different sets of colors.
Oh gosh, yes.
So it's really hard to tell which is the closest to it. But I'll come back onto that.
We looked at this with you, didn't we, Graham?
Yeah.
We had a long discussion about it.
I think also, as Bernard says, when you look at the, on Google or whatever, there are lots of different photographs which come out in different shades and colours and all the rest of it. And it's very, sometimes it's hard to see which is the
which is right. Yeah.
This is the one that was censored.
Well, it wasn't censored, but everybody thought he'd gone mad.
Well, it caused outrage, didn't it? At the time?
Yeah.
Yes, it did.
Yes, or else,
I think his fellow artists said you can't possibly display that. I think that was what.
Yeah. But
Anyway,
it's
but
like
it was. I think it was about, wasn't it 1920 before it went on public display?
no,
Or
it's a
something?
bit earlier than that. It had one display before them. It was yes, it was 1920. It was exhibited only once before then in 1916 at Salon d'Antin, and it was then kept in his studio, leaning against the wall, shrouded by cloths. But all that was soon to change. Carl Jung, when he saw this, said he saw in it the hallmarks of a deep psychotic breakdown.
Absolutely.
Which, I mean, you think he could.
But he's very young. He's only 26 or something when he first starts.
Yeah. And this is at the MoMA, the Museum of Modern Art in New York, which was very important in the history of this painting, because the director of that at that time was called Barr. He launched a campaign later on because he thought it was the most important artwork in the world, and with the war coming, it was shipped over to America, and they managed to get hold of it. That's where it's remained ever since.
That's good.
You get an idea of its size by looking at the people looking at it. That's where it's set up in MoMA, and this is if you like, the closest to the actual painting on the wall colours that I think.
Right. So it's lighter than I thought.
It's lighter than you think. Yes.
It's closer to flesh coloured, isn't it?
Yes.
True.
Yes, it's better. Yeah.
So it's got basically. Do you know what it's about?
No, not really.
Well,
they're prostitutes.
It's a brothel. That's right. It's a brothel. It isn't in Avignon. It was just the place where they make was called the Avignon. It's based on Parisian painting.
Is it a brothel? Did you say?
Yes.
Yes.
And he was very interested. He was very inspired by Iberian sculpture and African masks, which you can see in the painting to quite a lot, especially the ones on the right. And there's a slice of melon at the bottom, you might notice, which is
some grapes
on an upturned tabletop.
And some grapes.
The Avignon is a reference to a street in Barcelona. So it's not in France, it's in Barcelona, famed for its brothel.
Oh, right.
Yeah, I didn't know that. So he returned to painting and repainting this several times, and especially with the two rightmost prostitutes, to make them more mask-like and extreme, and to make it more radical as a painting. He repainted them after visiting the ethnographic collections of African art at the Palais de Trocadero. So the interesting thing about it is that it comes in a long tradition of painting nudes and painting prostitutes and brothels and the like. So this is one with Henri Matisse, who he very much followed in the way he painted. This, of course, is Toulouse-Lautrec, who did hundreds of ones based in brothels, as far as I can make out. And
he spent all his time there.
Yeah, one of the girls from the Rue d'Amboise brothel was Mireille. She's in the front with her leg lifted and her right hand on it. It's one of Lautrec's favourites.
It's a beautiful painting.
I think it's a really good one. That there's a lot of movement in it. And another one I like, which is not as well known perhaps, is this one by Degas, which was actually of addicts, absinthe addicts. And it was a big problem in the late 19th century. It caused public outrage because it showed somebody who was a well-known absinthe addict. It was the actress Hélène André, and the man was a Bohemian artist named Marcelin Desboutins. It was really originally called the Café l'Absinthe, referring to the alcoholic drink. But anyway, it was. I think it's a really good painting. I really like that one. The expressions on their faces are so good. Somebody in her own thoughts. And this is the final one of those by Manet, Les Serveuses de Bock by Manet, which was also taken in a similar sort of environment. Anyway, back to Les Demoiselles d'Avignon. And also a lot of the paintings were paintings he drew faces and things from his mistresses, and this is another area which I think can't be ignored with Picasso, is his relationships with women, which if I've got time I'll get onto. But with Les Demoiselles, I'll come on to it said that the second and third figures from the left, that one of them is very much like Michelangelo's Dying Slave, which he was very familiar with, and he was trying to link it in, but I don't see it very clearly that that's the case.
It's a pose that, imagine washing your back in the shower. You know, it's a pose that we use a lot, isn't it?
Well,
in various.
You might, Jackie.
Oh.
Yeah, you're right. It does look very much like that. Yeah.
It's very much, it's also a way of showing up your body off, isn't it? There's only certain things that bodies can do.
Yeah.
Well, I think I'll quit.
Yeah, put the shovel away.
According to some commentators on it, this is the most radical part of his treatment of the torso, was this figure parting the curtain. He renders her chest as a diamond shape, perplexingly shaded on one side. Neither fully two nor three-dimensional, she steps forward aggressively while simultaneously dematerializing before our eyes. The sexual come-on has been denied us by rendering soft flesh as angular geometries, swelling concavity as ambiguous convexivity. Well, if you understood that,
good Lord.
Thanks, Bernard.
Yeah, thank you.
I'll test you on this later. I'll test you on this later.
Very good.
And just one or two other comments that people have made about this. It embodies paradox, both in your face and intangible, belligerent and evasive. And it took him several months in repainting of the two of the five figures in a style without precedent in the Western tradition, in a form so novel, so aggressively defiant of any canons of beauty or proportion, that more than a century later they still give off a malevolent energy. He never felt more isolated after doing this. The painting unleashed universal anger. Eventually, at the height of the Great War, it was made its public debut, but then it was 1937. It went underground after the war and was shipped across the Atlantic in 1937. once it became. And this is what I took it from. Miles Unger, who's the artistic correspondent for The Economist, written a book about the painting that shocked the world in great detail. And whilst I think you can go overboard about it, it's very interesting looking at somebody who's really, really looked at a painting and given his own views on it. And that's where I've got some of these from. These are some of the other things he was doing at the time. It's one of the most expensive of his paintings at the time. In 1989, it got $41 million for it. So he's become a very popular man. Oh, hello, Christine. And Lapin and Appa.
Why is it called that? What does that?
What's a lapin? Is it a rabbit?
It's a rabbit.
It's a rabbit.
An
The agile rabbit. I don't know.
Agile.
No, it's actually, it was a famous cabaret club called Lapin Agile. Sorry about that,
two there because it's two.
Okay.
Two there.
Yeah,
yeah.
It's said to include a self-portrait of the artist who frequented the club in his youth. Maybe it's the guy at the back with the guitar. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
It sort of harks back to Lautrec, doesn't it? Really, in a way, but
yeah,
it's kind of influenced. Yeah.
And this one, of course.
This is amazing. This.
I think I'll leave this one for now because it deserves something. A greater attention to detail than I can do just now.
Needs a whole session just on that.
Well, I think so. I think that it really, really is an important painting, that one, for all sorts of reasons.
We have talked about that one before.
Oh, sorry if it's been done before.
No,
I talked about it a bit once.
Yeah. It's amazing.
We looked at the photograph of the actual post-bombing and then looked at the picture. Yeah,
but it's worth another visit, isn't it?
Yeah, of course.
Apparently, during the war, he was often harassed by the Gestapo. And when in one search of his apartment, an officer saw a photograph of the painting Guernica. "Did you do that?" the German asked Picasso. "No," he replied. "You did."
Oh,
which I thought was really good.
Yeah,
really
that's a very good.
But there's a lot of stuff like that. But what I will come on to is this. The women in his life. This is Françoise Gillot. She was an art student when she met Picasso in a cafe in 1943. He was 62, she was 22.
Did he ever marry her?
No,
did he marry her?
I don't think she did.
They were together a long time, weren't they?
Yeah, no, she did. She did marry. He was originally married to Olga Koklova, who is a ballerina, and he didn't want to divorce her because he didn't. In French law, she'd have got most of his estate. So I don't know how he solved that.
Oh, how good!
He had quite a few women.
He did indeed, which I will show you very quickly if we get time. He
was a bit of a one-in.
She eventually left him. She said. She quoted Picasso as saying, this is Françoise Gillot, who wrote a book. The couple divorced in 1962. Picasso's having said, "Women's are machines for suffering, and also told her, "For me, there are only two kinds of women, goddesses and doormats." Anyway, in 1970, this is a fact little known. She went and married Jonas Salk. Do you know who he was?
No, the name.
The guy who did
the vaccine for polio.
Polio vaccine, yes. So with one short name, you can connect Picasso to polio. But there you go.
That's really interesting.
I didn't know that. It's weird, isn't it? That I think.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
Here's another one of some of his major women.
Good heavens!
That's what I mean. He had a few, and there's more than that.
It's the tip of the iceberg, that, isn't it? Yeah.
He's had a few extras.
Yeah.
Few extras on top of that.
This painting, she's actually nude in it, but I think they've kept it. I thought it was better than having. I don't like putting nudes on for some reason. This is Jacqueline Roch, who she was the one who was his third wife and the one who prevented his grandchildren by other women from coming to his funeral.
Oh.
That led to Picasso's son developing a fatal alcoholism and he died by suicide that year by ingesting bleach when he was barred from attending the artist's funeral.
Oh,
How cruel of her, how
that's
cruel.
cruel.
Hard-faced bitch, sorry.
But anyway, she herself committed suicide after he died. She was
Oh,
absolutely obsessed
dear.
by him, and
Oh dear.
yeah, she worshipped him.
What a tragedy.
He said himself multiple times that she made him a religion. So she was and that's one painting he did of her. He did lots and lots of paintings of her. I don't know why I've got that one in Sleeping Pleasant.
That's unusual.
That I thought it was very unusual. I thought I usually end up with paintings that I actually like that aren't commonly seen, and I
I've
do
never
like this
seen
one.
that before. I like it. It's another with these fat ladies, though, isn't it? Big legs. A lot of these artists seem to go for these big women.
It
don't
always
they?
comes back to Beryl Cook.
Beryl Cook.
Cook. Yes, that's exactly what I was thinking.
The font of all artistic expression is Beryl Cook when it gets down to it.
Perhaps I don't need to lose weight after all.
And this one, of course, is a famous one. Do you know why that's famous? It's for the amount of money it cost when it was sold.
Is that sold recently?
Yeah, it was in 2004, and it sold for $104 million, Sotheby's, which isn't the most expensive one of the lot, but it's pretty expensive. It was painted during his rose period. Which,
yes.
oh, well, I think that you can say that one is because it's got actually roses in it.
Absolutely. It's a bit like narrowboat roses in the background.
Yes, they are.
Aren't they? The way that they're
Narrowboat
painted.
art. Yeah, who's that?
Yeah.
The sounds, yeah, the emphasis.
Beryl Cook and narrowboats. Who would have thought? It was during his rose period, and he was 24 years old, and it's the Parisian boy holding a pipe who wears a garland of flowers surrounded by 2 floral decorations. And of course, there's loads more, but I think I'll leave it there because
2 minutes.
yeah, because we've only got 2 minutes left.
That was really
4 minutes according to my screen. But anyway.
Oh, well, we'll go with you, Graham. We like yours better.
You're quite right. Yeah, you're quite right. But yeah, it's been. I found Picasso by far the hardest of the ones of the artists I've looked at.
I think you get so many different styles of painting, don't you? That's. I mean, just what you showed us today. The kind of range of things that he does is amazing, really. You know, kind of.
Do you think there's any comparison between Picasso and Hockney in that sense?
Ah, funny you should.
Yes, because he's another one.
If I've got time, I'll show you. David Hockney. You can read that there. He painted this when he's 84 years old, Picasso, and he was dismissed by an art critic he was wandering around in. And he says he thinks it's full of vitality that shimmers from the canvas, his sense of joy of music. And I think there was this one as well, in which it became a touchstone. His Embrace, painted in 1971. Picasso remained a touchstone for Hockney, particularly late work, which as he gets older, he sees even more clearly. And the critic saying was how poor it was. And so he went and had a proper look at it. And he said, you might not be interested, but these paintings are about being an old man. There's a painting of an old guy, his legs crooked, his balls on the floor, a woman trying to hold him up. I said, these are the themes only the greatest take on. You wouldn't get it in Andy Warhol, which I think is good. So yes, I think there is a strong link there with Hockney. I think Hockney is a great fan of Picasso, especially his later work, which is certainly worth seeing. Anyway, I think we're down to 2 minutes now.
That was really, really interesting.
Thank you. Yeah.
I'm really enjoying these. I'm learning such a lot. All the things I wanted to know.
That's why I'm doing it for myself, really. And as I've said, the best way of doing that is trying to explain it to other people.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you're doing that.